Was Luigi a killer with intention, a calculated killer, or was he a symbol of public frustration? But in the case of Luigi, we are seeing that a large portion of the evidence that would be used against him was actually thrown out. So the question in the Mangione case is no longer just about if he did it, but again, can the prosecution prove it? What happens when police arrest the person they believe committed one of the most high-profile murders in America? They find a gun, they find writings that reveal motive, they find items they believe connect him to the crime. And then a judge says some of that evidence cannot be used. Not because it was fake, not because it's not important, but because of the Constitution. Because here in America, it's not just about what you did, but can the prosecution prove it? And that difference can change the entire direction of a murder trial. Scholars, by the end of this video, you'll have the latest updates on the Luigi Mangione case. Be sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe. I'm Dr. Moore, criminologist, forensic psychology professor, and former law enforcement official. And today we investigate Luigi Mangione, a murder case, a constitutional challenge, and the concept of fruit from the poisonous tree. So to bring you up to speed with this case, let me take it back to bring it forward. On December 4th, 2004, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot and killed outside a Manhattan hotel. The case immediately captured news media all across the country. And the biggest question was why? Because this was not just a regular murder homicide. This case involved a powerful CEO and executive, public anger towards large healthcare systems, and a suspect at the center of it all who drew mass media attention. And this question really divided the country. Was Luigi with intention, a calculated, or was he a symbol of public frustration? Here is where this case takes a bit of a turn. Police arrested Luigi a few days later at a local McDonald's. They searched his backpack. Inside are items they believe were connected to this murder investigation. And the prosecution sees this as potentially evidence, right? Items in the backpack leading or giving some information about the possibility of his connection to this crime case. It seems like it's all coming together. But there was one snafu. It was the way the evidence was collected. All right, so let's dive into the Fourth Amendment, because you know I love our constitutional rights. And Fourth Amendment really protects us against unreasonable searches and seizures. And so again, remember this concept of him being arrested by the police and them searching his bag. That is what happened, but was the search justified? And that's where this Fourth Amendment argument really falls into play. So in order to conduct a search, police generally need a warrant, they need consent, they need some level of probable cause or an exceptional exemption to validate a search. And Luigi's defense argued that the search of his backpack was illegally conducted. They argue that the officers searched first and then later justified the search, out of sequence with the way that that process is actually supposed to be conducted. And so here now opens up the door for this concept of fruit of the poisonous tree. For many of the criminology students, and particularly our pre-law students, you're probably very familiar with this term. But for those of you who may not be as familiar, let me break it down for you. Essentially, it's saying that if police conduct a search without following the rules, the confines that guide and dictate a search, then the items that they find in that search are considered to be illegally gotten, and they will not be able to be used in the court of law. So this concept of fruit from the poisonous tree, just kind of think if a tree is poison, then the fruit that it bears will also be poison. And so that translates into the court space. So the information or evidence that the police are able to extract cannot be utilized in the court space because the process of which it was gotten was illegally conducted. All right, so now we got the concept together. We are seeing the connections between the Fourth Amendment and Luigi's search of the backpack. And so now kind of bringing it all together here. So now I just want to clarify, because this is where some of our media outlets are not completely accurately reporting what's going on. So in this case, the evidence collected from Luigi in the backpack, the judge actually threw that out. However, there are other items that are still part of the discovery that are still included in this investigation. The judge made a split decision and suppressed some evidence while allowing the other evidence to still be used in the court space. So what does that mean? Well, that means that prosecutors cannot use it as well. And so that is going to be to the advantage of Luigi as well as his defense team. We'll see how that continues to play itself out in the court space. But I do want to say that while some evidence and most of the evidence was thrown out and, as it was associated with that backpack search, the other information and evidence that was not illegally gotten will still be able to be applied in the court space here. In this case, the defense wanted the entire tree cut down, but the judge just knocked off a couple of branches. So just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective of how this will land. So the court allowed the firearm to remain as a piece of evidence, as well as writings that the prosecution is using to explain some of the motives associated with Luigi's behavior. All right, so just to introduce a couple of more court terminology, some terms to bring it all together. The first one here is independent source doctrine. So if evidence is collected through a separate but legal pathway, it could still be used in the court space, even if the search initially conducted was not completely legal. Right, so that is one exception to the fruit of the poisonous tree. Another one here is inevitable discovery, which basically states that throughout the course of an investigation, this information would have come to light anyway. And so in those circumstances, fruit from the poisonous tree could possibly be included back into the court space. And then lastly, attenuation. If the connection between the mistake becomes weaker because of later evidence or events, then there's a possibility that evidence collected in that way could possibly be used as well. So while we have the fruit of the poisonous tree, we still have some exceptions to the rule because, hey, here it seems like there's always an exception or two to the rule. But in the case of Luigi, we are seeing that a large portion of the evidence that would be used against him was actually thrown out. And so, case continuing and case pending, we will stay tuned for the updates following that. But wanted to give you that perspective and that information. So these constitutional protections are not technicalities. They're actually safeguards to keep the court space sacred, right? To make sure that the rules and laws that apply on the outs are also applied and implemented into the court space. And ultimately, when we think about the integrity of the court process and making sure that it is as fair and just as possible, those safeguards exist to provide that. So, scholars, hoping you've been taking notes because a quiz is soon to follow. Be sure to participate. For anyone who does, I'll be sure to give you a shout out on a future episode. Can't beat that. So the question in the Mangione case is no longer just about if he did it, but again, can the prosecution prove it with evidence obtained legally? Well, that is the question, and we will see how this case continues to unfold. So be sure to weigh in on this case. Be sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe. Don't just follow the headlines. Understand the system behind the headlines. So scholars, continue to educate, empower, and enact the changes that you want to see. Check out the coverage of other previous high-profile cases. Click over here.
Want more with Dr. Moore, the criminologist of the Bay? Be sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, educate, empower, and enact the changes you want to see. Want more?